Welcome to the Two Blokes Chatting radio show on 94.7 The Pulse. Music, interviews, news, and, well, Two Blokes Chatting. Now, here are the two blokes.
Robert, that's a song called Hitchhiker by Bobby and Laurie. Now, on the 14th of May, 1966, so we're going 57 years ago, that song hit number one in Australia, according to the Australian Music Charts book by David Kent.
And there's no reason to doubt them.
No, absolutely. That dislodged a band called the Beatles from number one. Yeah, they had a song called Nowhere Man that was at number one the week before. 5 weeks at number one, that song. And then it got dislodged down to number 4 on the 18th of June 1966. The three bands that knocked it off, or the three artists that knocked it off, the Rolling Stones, Manfred Mann, and Dusty Springfield.
There you go.
No shame in running second to that lot, I wouldn't have thought. The reason we are talking about that is that was a duo called Bobby and Laurie. Sadly, Laurie was passed away in 2002, but we're delighted to be able to introduce Bobby Bright. Good morning to you, Bob.
G'day, how you doing, Rob?
And Neil is the other voice you've got as well. Thanks for joining us. It's terrific to have a chat to you. You were kind of taken on the world by taking on the Beatles, the Rolling Stones and that lot.
Yeah, we used to think they were competition.
They used to think the same about you, I suspect.
The confidence of youth, you know.
So take us back to where it all started. You're an Adelaide boy, like 95% of the music industry in Australia. What was in the water in Adelaide that made great musicians?
I don't really know. The opportunity came because Adelaide was lagging behind the rest of Australia, and we got television later than Melbourne and Sydney, and they were looking for talent. And I had a mate who used to play men's basketball, and they had a social, and I went along. I was about 14, I think, and I drank alcohol for the first time in my life, and somehow finished up singing with the band that was there that night. What asked.
Many a good idea has started with alcohol, by the sound of things.
Yeah, well, it was cream de menthe, horrible.
Oh, I used to love that, Bobby.
Oh, it was a nice colour green, you know.
Something a bit different.
Billy Connolly does a superb comedy skit about creme de menthe and throwing it up, and it's another story for another day.
I was at a dinner party last night, Bobby, and knew you were coming on. I didn't want to sort of give clues out, so I just threw the word hitchhiker in, and the conversation went wild. It took a while to get Bobby and Laurie. They were eventually onto it. And good morning to Neil and Peter and Isabel and Jeff, who played that game last night with Robin and I. But it's a song that is synonymous, and for many, as soon as you hear Hitchhiker, immediately Bobby and Laurie follows. But the concept of the song, even back in the 60s when things were a bit weird, where did it come from?
Came out of Laurie Allen's brain, which was slightly left of centre, or maybe right of centre, I'm not quite sure. That he had the biggest record collection you've ever seen. And he was a Roger Miller fan, and it was a Roger Miller song. And we'd had success like with I Belong With You and other stuff with Go Records, and we moved across to be with Alberts, and they, were going through material, and that came out of Laurie's head. He said, "Why don't we have a go at this?" And we just bought from, we were in Adelaide, and someone had a fuzz box there, which was a pretty unknown sort of thing at the time. They weren't everywhere. And we decided that that would be a good thing to use. On the Roger Miller version, it was saxophones. So our version was a bit more up-tempo, and we had the fuzz box sort of doing that car noise and the guitar solo behind the monologue, you know.
Yeah.
And everyone at Alberts liked it, and it became a hit.
So in all seriousness, Bobby, when you boys finished it, you put it on the vinyl and sent it out to the marketplace. Where did you really think it was going to hit? You certainly wouldn't have gone for 5 weeks at number one, I'm tipping.
No. Although, again, the confidence of youth, I think we thought that anything we put out would sell. But no, we wouldn't have expected to be at number one like that. It was good. I mean, I think I Belong With You hit number one here in Melbourne briefly, but it hung around number 3 to back to 5 sort of thing.
Mm. So
yeah, we were used to having success.
So obviously you grew up in Adelaide. My understanding is that Laurie grew up in Melbourne. It's not something you sort of bump into one another walking down Chapel Street. How did you guys meet and start thinking, hey, this is a good idea, let's play together?
Came across to Melbourne with a dance promoter called Ivan Damon from Adelaide. He bought a couple of picture theatres, one in Mailing Road, Canterbury, and another one in Preston. And we used to drive across from Adelaide on a Thursday, and we'd work Canterbury, then Friday night Mariana Hall in Sunshine, Saturday night in Preston, Sunday drive back to Adelaide. And that went on for a few weeks, and then I thought, stuff it, I'm going to stay in Melbourne. And in those days you used to have 2 bands on.
Yep.
The dancers. And one band was the Planets, who we used to sing with. The other band was the Blue Jays, and Laurie was the singer for the Blue Jays. And after gigs, then we used to sit around and have a beer, and Laurie usually liked singing harmony. And I don't know, at some stage he said to me, any Everly Brothers songs? And I said, yeah, sure. He said, I will sing one. So that's how it started, and he sort of played guitar, and I sang an Everly Brothers song, and then we did another one, and then we did another one. People started saying, geez, you guys sound good together. But you should maybe do something. And we fought that. We didn't want to do that. We were both solo singers.
Yep.
And so for a while we went out as 2 solo singers who'd do guest spots during the night, and then at the end of the night, we'd do a short bracket as a duo. That's how it started.
And coming up with the name, I wouldn't have thought took you a great deal of time to come up with it. It would have been an argument whether it was Bobby and Laurie or Laurie and Bobby.
Well, it started off as Laurie Allen and Bobby Bright.
Right.
But then people just started calling us Bobby and Laurie, and when we shifted across to Alberts, that's what it became, Bobby and Laurie.
A lot of people have come together through a love of music, but were you really, really good mates as well?
Yeah, we were. Yeah, we were pretty similar in what we liked in music-wise. Laurie was a bit more country orientated than me, and I was more into a bit soul music type of thing. But yeah, we never really argued about anything. We sort of knew. We knew what each of us was better at, He was better at picking material than me, but he wrote I Belong With You as a waltz, and I sort of said it's a good song, but it's not going to, it's not going to work as a waltz. So it was me that turned it into a sort of stomping rock and roll song. So I was more on the production side. Laurie was good at picking the music, but I was sort of better at production type thinking.
And Hitchhiker's a good example of that, I suppose, because it was, the weird sounds that you talked about coming out of that box. That's got to be a creative mind or a collaborative creativity session to come up with that, which was quite catchy and probably was the reason why it caught on.
Oh, I think it definitely. I remember recording it. We did it in Sydney, and Roger Treble was playing guitar, and he was having trouble switching from ordinary tone to getting the fuzz box on, because you've got to press a button on the floor, and he was all nervous about that, so finished up with me laying on the floor, pressing the button on the fuzz box whenever that was due in the song, you know.
And you had a band that backed you quite a bit, the Rondells. They had a couple of notable players in there, Gary Young, Wayne Duncan. How did the Rondells get involved?
Well, the original Rondells was a band that was together at the time. I don't know what they were called, I can't remember, but that was like Bernie O'Brien, Dennis Collins, a couple of other people. And we started touring when I Belong With You took off. We started touring. Those other guys had jobs, and they decided that they didn't want to go touring, so we had to look for a new Rondells. And that was when Gary Young, Wayne Duncan, Roger Treble, and I can't remember who we. Oh, yeah, John something or other. They was playing the bass, but they were a band. Mate,
that's John will know who he is.
But anyway, we auditioned a few people, and they were sort of young schoolboys basically.
Yeah.
And we were doing pantomimes at that time, which was sort of a thing copied from the English scene where that was quite regular. And we had a pantomime in Adelaide, and we said to these guys, look, we've got to go to Adelaide tomorrow. Can you come? And they all went, yeah. And so we were in Adelaide doing the pantomime, and they were back at the motel learning our repertoire.
Bobby, I just want to go back to Hitchhiker, the sounds that you created in the studio. When you went to perform it live, though, how close were you able to create those sounds under that pressure of live performance? And if you didn't quite hit it, was there a sense of disappointment from the audience?
No, we had that together by then. Yeah. And it sounded like the record.
Bob was able to stand up for most of the performance. You'd have to lay down on the floor next to it.
Yes, I did know. There was no laying down on the job.
Not until after a couple of cans, anyway.
No laying down.
And for those who are playing along at home, we're talking to Bob Bright, formerly of Bobby and Laurie fame. And when I was mentioning Wayne Duncan and Gary Young, of course, they went on to work with a couple of blokes called Ross and became Daddy Cool in 1971. But
that's right. And became probably the best rhythm section around those days.
Yeah, they were just phenomenal, weren't they? Now, Bob, we don't like to dwell on the bad times, but there was that time where you became a really bad guy in Homicide a lot. You often you were the ne'er-do-well who was always...
I was a good baddie.
I can remember, because I had the box set of Homicide. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, is there, in Division 4? And every now and again, this bloke would pop up on screen and think, I know that bloke's face from somewhere, and I can't work out where it was. And you obviously got into a bit of acting, generally as the sort of brooding young fella.
Yeah, I had to go acting for a while. I never really thought of myself as an actor, but people kept asking me to do stuff, so I did. I didn't grow up with a passion to be an actor.
Well, it helped you a pretty good-looking rooster. I think that helped a little bit in terms of being, the brooding guy that all the girls wanted.
Yeah, there was a bit of that about it, I guess.
So, obviously, for a while there, you and Laurie went your separate ways, but you came back together a few times in the late 60s, early 70s to create a few more hits. During that time, did you go and do solo stuff, or were you just focusing on your acting and Laurie doing his music?
I went to radio, actually.
Okay.
I worked on 3XY. I started off doing Midnight to Dawn type stuff, and then they shifted me to Drive. But yeah, Ron Tudor, a name that had a lot to do with the whole Australian music scene.
Yes, indeed.
A&R guy for W&G when I first met him. He came and said, mate, I've got this great song that you and Laurie should do. Because he'd just started the Fable record label.
Yes.
And that was Carroll County Accident. And, of course, that was right up Laurie's alley because he was big on country. So all the guitar playing on that record is Laurie.
Okay.
And it was quite a big hit. I don't think it ever went to number one anywhere, but it hung around for a while.
Well, I'm a little bit younger than Rob, and therefore I was about 7 or 8 when that came out. And the first time I ever I can remember hearing it, was I got a record given to me for Christmas called 20 Fable Chartbusters. And there was Bobby and Laurie and Carroll County Accident. The one thing I've never quite worked out about that song, and I know you didn't write it, so you can't answer it necessarily, the bloke gives in great detail what happened. We all know that the two people in the town were, doing something they shouldn't be doing. And then the last line, I swore a sacred oath that I would never tell. And yet here it is in song being sung all over the world. Puzzling.
Yeah, a bit of it.
We've been in suspense for 50 years, Bobby.
Sorry?
We've been in suspense for 50 years, waiting for the end of the story.
Well, he was never going to tell about dropping the ring down the well, therefore letting other people know what was really going on.
Yeah, and then goes out and writes a song that goes all around the world. It's an interesting way not to tell anybody.
It is indeed.
Oh, there you go.
Bobby, influences in your music career, because as a pair, you're different yourselves, so different influences on different sides. But what about Bobby Bright as a teenager, young teen, and the Australian music or the world music scene was quite crazy then? Who did you buy records from?
Elvis Presley, Eddie Cochran, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Johnny Cash. That's probably, you get the genre there.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a fairly common theme in amongst all that.
The first time I heard Elvis, I thought, wow, what is that? Heartbreak Hotel. What's that sound? And then I saw a picture of it, and I was walking down the main Rundle Street in Adelaide, and there was a picture of this guy, and I thought, geez, he looks like he comes from outer space. He just looked different to the average guy walking around.
So when you started singing, is that the sort of stuff you sung, or were you doing the more the standards that people were familiar with?
No, I was singing rock and roll from the very start. Rockabilly,
Yeah.
Did you have formal music training, or is it all self-taught?
Yeah, I never had a lesson.
Yeah, using the gift that's been provided by the sound of it.
The Ella Fitzgerald method of singing. See, apparently someone asked her, how they could singing lessons, and she said, well, it's quite easy, really. You sort of open your mouth and whatever sound comes out, you work with it.
But I'm fascinated by the blend of you and Laurie, and we just heard from Simon and Garfunkel, and the voices that come together. It's a bit of a freak of nature, isn't it? That two people who, one from Adelaide, one from Melbourne, happen to be sitting around singing an Everly Brothers song, and you go, yeah, that's a combination that works. If you ever heard Rob and I sing, but no,
that won't work.
Yeah, it's true. We were aware that the sum of the parts was greater than either of us, Like we both had, we could both sing in tune, which is good for a start.
Mm.
And yeah, the blend was there. We didn't have to really try. It was just a matter. We you said before we had time apart. There was never a time when we didn't do a couple of gigs. We even just 2 weeks before Laurie died, we did a concert. And it was always there. It didn't ever go away. We used to try and get one big show in a year at least.
Yeah.
Sometimes we do. One stage we went up to. We did the Northern Territory. That was fun, doing Darwin and Alice Springs. And
those audiences probably really appreciate your style of music as well. It being a country connection to it, but you'd probably be popular up there.
Yeah, the shows were good. And by that stage, we'd sort of learnt a bit of stagecraft, a bit of patter here and there, a few jokes, a bit of I mean, we had a good connection in humour too. We both liked English comedy. I was a Mad Goons fan, and Laurie was sort of, pardon me, Laurie was sort of into it too, and it became sort of we got the confidence up to just go on stage and think, yeah, well, something will happen and we'll make something of it. You know, and that was true right through our career. At one stage, I remember we used to work at a place called the Surf Rider in Melbourne. This was back in about 1964, 5, somewhere around there. And we'd do stuff like, we'd find a show bag, like someone had been to the show, and there was a show bag, so we wouldn't look in it. We'd just take it on stage and then start taking things out of it and somehow making jokes out of what we found, you know.
We could try that on radio, but it probably wouldn't work quite as well, would it?
Hey, Bobby, we know about the hits, but was the thing that you enjoyed doing most and thought that best epitomised the strength of Bobby and Laurie's combination that maybe didn't sell that well, but you loved performing?
Whenever we worked, it was fantastic. You know, we both really enjoyed doing what we did, and I think that came across.
Was there a particular song that you enjoyed more than any others, if it wasn't one of the hits?
Not really. Most of the show was stuff we'd recorded. Something I'm particularly proud of was we did the year before Laurie died, was a song called Athenry, which was an old Irish song, and Laurie had inherited some money from his folks dying and said, well, we should do an album, you know. So we were working on songs, and he brought this song to me, and it was this Irish guy with a really squeaky voice and a really sort of horrible organ sound, but the song was good. The Fields of Athenry, it was called.
A beautiful, beautiful song. I've heard it covered many, many times, and I'm now going to try and find yours.
Well, if you're really good, I'll send you a copy.
No, it's a magnificent song, a beautiful song. I can understand why you'd be drawn to it.
Yeah, well, there's actually, if you dig around on YouTube, there's a film of us doing it at the last concert we ever did. And the place, you could hear a pin drop. It really worked. But I'll send you an email. I'll email you a copy of it if you like.
I might be able to find it myself, but you've got me intrigued because that is a beautiful song, and it would help sort of see the work that you did together, because that harmony stuff, I imagine, would be beautiful on it. Looking forward to it.
So, Bobby, we are going to let you go, but you did create a bit of a problem for me this morning. We have a bit of a rule of thumb. We've spoken to a lot of people like you, and we are absolutely delighted and thrilled to be able to do that. But when you interview someone like Russell Morris, you've got to play the real thing, and then we generally follow it up with Rachel. And, Mike Rudd, we play, I'll Be Gone and Esmeralda. But with you, I'm going to break with tradition. We're not going to play 2 of your songs on the show today. We're going to actually play 3, because I couldn't split the last 2. We have to play Carroll County Accident, because we've talked about it. But the other one I'm going to play, because I just love it as a song, and this morning I watched it on the YouTube version, I think probably from maybe the Go Show or one of the sort of night programs, called The Eyes of Love, or Looking Through the Eyes of Love. What a magnificent song that is.
Yeah, that was another Ron Tudor find. That was a follow-up to Carroll County for Fable.
That was also on my 20 Fable Chartbusters album, which I think is why I like it so much. But I'll give you the tip. In the film clip, I'm not sure that you guys were singing. I think there might have been some miming going on.
Sorry?
I think there might have been some miming going on in the film clip.
Yeah.
But it's all good. Hey, Bob, it's been an absolute thrill to be able to track you down via Facebook, in fact, is how we did that. And thank you so much for responding to the message from some random who wanted to chat to you on the radio. It's been an absolute thrill having you on the show, and all power to you.
Well, thanks for that. And as I say, if you don't find Fields of Athenry, get back to me.
I've got it already, mate.
He's onto it. He's onto it.
The Google box has come up trumps.
Bob Bright, thank you so much for being part of the program today, and we look forward to keeping in touch down the track.
No worries.
All the best.
Best wishes, Bob.